What's up, guys? I genuinely hope you all are having a great day. We're actually out here at the garage today, about to take the Beamer for a little drive. Oh, it's totally dead. And as a quick little update for everyone before we get too deep into things, I have been in contact with RK Tunes to get my updated tune for the M50 manifold swap that we did in the last video, so that's on its way, and obviously I'm gonna give you guys my impressions on that. It's been over a week since I drove the thing last, and the last time I drove it, the battery wasn't that charged, so I gotta go take it for a drive to charge this thing up, and have a little fun, of course. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you guys about something that's been happening with BMW lately that I've noticed that I think is kind of some big news. We kind of have to start by talking about the classics that BMW used to make. And when I say classics, I'm kind of talking about the E30, the E36, E46, maybe the E34 and E39 M5s, cars like that. So if you're into any of those older BMWs and you've looked at any of the values lately, at least in the past couple years, you will have noticed that their values have been skyrocketing. For instance, let's talk about the E30 M3. Just maybe 5 or 6 years ago, you could have picked one of those things up for so cheap, but now, I just looked yesterday and I saw that E30 M3s with under 100,000 miles, kind of depending on the model and whatnot, have been going anywhere between $60,000 and over $100,000. Now what about the E36 M3 like the one I have right here? E36 M3s, obviously kind of depending on the market, have been going up a ton in value lately as well. So mine has 78,000 miles, and I looked at the values of those, and ones like these that are a coupe with a manual transmission in the condition that mine is in are going anywhere between, say, like 18 to 22,000, as opposed to maybe 5 or 6 years ago when you could have picked one of those things up for easily under 10. And I honestly can't think of any other brand that has generally the majority of their older performance cars all going up in value at one time that much. So why are these older BMWs costing even more than some of the new ones? And why are people willing to pay such high prices for them? Let me pull up a quick chair here and we'll have a talk about it. All right. So, my thoughts on why people are willing to pay so much for these cars and why the market has been driven up so much recently kind of goes back to the old saying that BMW used to use, the old phrase they used to use for marketing, and that was that BMW is the ultimate driving machine. That kind of tagline that they used was very true to the cars that they used to make back then. Why were they the ultimate driving machine? I kind of think that the formula has to do with the fact that they were simple, that there wasn't a lot of complication to them, they were very analog, and connected you really well with the car when you were driving. It made you almost feel like you were one with it. You could feel everything that was going on with the steering, you could feel everything that was going on through the road and the suspension. They're rear-wheel drive, they had naturally aspirated engines, and it's kind of hard to find all of that together in one car today. You know, with these older cars, there's a big reason why you don't see a lot of 80s and 90s and early 2000s Mercedes at racetracks and at drift events being drift cars, because they just weren't as good as these older BMWs were. See, BMWs, at least older BMWs, used to be more a performance car that had a little bit of luxury attached to them instead of luxury cars that had some pretty good performance. So what about today? What kind of cars does BMW make or have they been making in the last few years? My argument is that BMW somewhat strayed away from making the ultimate driving machine and kind of transformed more into the ultimate performing machine. What's the difference? In my opinion, the ultimate driving machine really is a car that is extremely enjoyable to drive because of that driving experience. So when I say that in recent years they've gone more towards the ultimate performing machine, I don't mean that they're not fun to drive or that they're not exhilarating or that they don't have extreme limits. Just that they've been kind of numbed down a little bit for comfort reasons and maybe don't have the same kind of connection that the older cars used to have. And that also doesn't mean that I wouldn't want to own one. Had I not bought this E36 M3, I definitely would have bought something with an N54, like a 135 or a 335 or something like that. Now, in my opinion, BMW has always made awesome cars. It doesn't really matter the generation. Like the 335 with the N54 that I just talked about. $596, $583. That comes with an engine that is extremely capable and has kind of been touted as the German 2JZ. That's an engine that you can take and more than double the wheel horsepower of it, and you can daily drive that thing, you can track that thing, and it's pretty much gonna stay reliable and pretty bulletproof. And there's not many manufacturers or many engines that have ever been made that you can say is possible like that. Or even maybe the F80 M3, a car that's really fast and outperformed a lot of its competitors, especially on the track, but was kind of touted by journalists as not really feeling like a true BMW. In fact, one of the videos that Motor Trend did, where they did a comparison between the 3 Series and the Audi S4, the C63 AMG, and the Cadillac ATS-V, they actually said that the Cadillac ATS-V is what reminded them most of the BMWs of old, as far as the chassis tuning and the suspension feel, steering feel, the nimbleness and things like that. And like I said, don't get mad if you own one of these newer BMWs, because they're still awesome to drive. They still outperform most of their competitors with almost every model. And maybe to you, saying that they're not the same as the older BMWs really is not a bad thing at all. And like I mentioned, in the recent years, BMW has been receiving a lot of criticism, and it's done some good things. The cool thing to me is that BMW is a brand that really seems to listen to the people who are passionate about their cars. Here's where the really exciting news comes in, and I'm gonna give you guys a few examples so we can get into that. So to illustrate what I mean, let's talk about, let's say, the 4 most recent performance BMWs that they have recently started to manufacture. The new M5, the new Z4, the new M850i, and the new, I think the chassis code is G20 3 Series. It seems that with every single one of these new performance BMWs that's coming out, that BMW has kind of returned to their roots and making cars like their old ones again. When I say that they're making cars like their old ones again, I'm not really saying that you're gonna see an E34 M5 roll off the production line, more like you're gonna be seeing the new M5 rolling off the production line, having a lot of the same feeling as the older M5s that everybody loves. What I'm seeing in all the articles that I've read and a lot of the videos that I've watched of these newer BMWs that I just mentioned is the journalists are all touting that the steering feel, the chassis tuning, and everything is really starting to remind them again of the old BMWs that everybody misses. All of these cars seem to have regained a lot of the soul of the older BMWs that have been lost in these kind of recent years in the past. What does that mean? It means that instead of having more of a rubbery, soft feel to the steering, to the chassis and suspension and things like that, it's all been sharpened up, and that a lot of the feeling that was numbed down has been brought back. And it's cool because when the BMW engineers have talked about things they've changed on these newer cars, a lot of what they mention are things like bushings and stuff like that that have to do with, instead of numbing the feeling of the car down to make it more comfortable, sharpening it up to make it more fun and engaging to drive. So here's my prediction. In all of the cars that you're going to see rolling out from BMW, they're going to receive a lot of the same praise that the new M5, the new Z4, the new 3 Series, and the new M850i have received. And I think that this is going to be a huge thing for BMW. I think they're going to start selling more cars. I think that they're going to regain a lot of repeat sales from people who have loved the older BMWs but maybe weren't too in love with some of the newer ones. And it's not only going to keep BMW, instead of just being on the top of the podium with performance, but also with drivability enjoyment. And I think just in general, it's gonna create a lot more business for BMW. And I can't wait to see the kind of cars that BMW is gonna be coming up with when they combine the modern performance and technology that they have today with the old chassis feel and suspension tuning of the BMW cars of old. And whether you like older BMWs, you like newer BMWs, they're all good to me. We have a lot more German car and BMW related content on the way ahead of us, especially with my E36 M3. If you guys enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not subscribed to the channel, remember to hit that subscribe button as well as the notification bell so that you don't miss an episode. We've got a lot of German car related content coming up. Older BMWs like my E36 M3 and newer BMWs as well. With that said, I think it's about time for me to go for a rip. So I will see you guys in the next one.